Hey guys, have we got a cracker of a show lined up for you? Today you're going to get to meet Jiv, the youngest person to appear on our show at the ripe old age of 27. He's going to talk to us about his experiences of mental health, and within that he's going to unpick his relationships, both with himself and with his partner, and how those relationships have kind of evolved as time has gone on, but also the journey of discovering who he really is and who he wanted to be. Check this out.
So obviously you guys have known me as Jiv, you talk to me as Jiv, but my birth name is Jack. And at that point I was sort of, I needed a fresh start. So I'd always had the nickname Jiv from secondary school and sort of from sports teams and stuff, but I then decided to take that on and be sort of like my primary name, if you will, and using my nickname more because I needed a fresh start because I didn't like who Jack had been.
He's also going to talk to us about the challenges of loneliness and isolation. And within that context, he's going to share with us his experiences of his dissertation from university, which was entitled Alone in the Wild. And within that, he spent 3 days up on Dartmoor National Park, completely on his own. So it's a fascinating story. He learned lots of things along the way, and he's going to share some of that experience with us, which is really, really interesting.
Essentially, what it was me going onto Dartmoor National Park for 3 days with no contact from the outside world or other people at all.
Jiv's also going to talk to us about his experiences of self-harm, which might not be what you would expect to hear.
I was still playing football. I was massively into that, and I wasn't making very healthy decisions off the pitch. But on the pitch, I was making extremely unhealthy decisions. And in reflection, and with people I've spoken to in recent years, I was essentially self-harming while playing football, which it sounds like a really weird construct, but I was a defender. So I was in a position where I would be using my head a lot, and there would be a lot of tackles. And I was just doing stupid stuff. I would throw myself into things head first, literally. And it was just it was an untraditional way of self-harming because I wanted to get hurt. I didn't like myself at the time.
And as well as all the usual takeaway chat, we'll also talk about muck and happiness.
Unhappiness is the gap between what you expect and your reality. So if you're expecting a double Big Mac and you just got the 2 patties with the standard amount of bread, that gap is called unhappiness. So I can understand your dismay.
That's called muck and happiness. So to hear all of that and much, much more, stay tuned, sit back, relax, and you'll also get to find out what caused this reaction.
Very good. Dear. Very good.
I've been sat on that for about 20 minutes.
That's... I would be switching off now if I was listening to this podcast.
As you can imagine, being in the classroom with Brad for half of this previous school year, I got so many jokes like that.
So, Jim, what we like to do is we like to ask questions about getting a takeaway because it's an easy subject to talk about. And actually, when we talk about getting a takeaway, there's lots of factors around that can affect someone's mental health. So let's just say it's whatever day or evening of the week that you might get a takeaway. What would you go for?
So we're actually a little bit boring in our household. So more than likely we go for McDonald's. But if we but if we actually have the choice to like actually sit down and order something as like a treat takeaway, we'll go for a Chinese.
Do you know what? Can we go with McDonald's? Can I find out more about that? I just think it's interesting when we can compare our differences. So I only ever have McDonald's out. If I'm out somewhere, like I'll grab a McDonald's, but I won't bring it home. So I want to hear more about having a McDonald's as a takeaway and bringing it home. What would your order be?
Well, because we're so centrally located in the city, we have like anything available to us. Obviously, it's just that ease and sort of low price of a McDonald's that we sort of go for. I really, really rotate in what I have. It's either a Big Mac meal or a quarter pounder meal, which is really boring, I know. But we will sort of switch it up and add like the cheese bites or My partner's rich. She will always mix it up. She'll either be in like a chickeny mood or like a beefy mood. Um, and yeah, we often they do like a point system where when you spend a certain amount of money, if you've got the app, you can gain points and then get free stuff. So it's just one of that's probably the only reason we do it is just because of the price point.
So coming back to the reason that we ask about takeaways is we always get into who's going to be having that takeaway with you. And you've said about we and my partner and that you live centrally. So whereabouts is it you live?
So I am in Plymouth city centre.
Okay.
And I live in a flat with my partner. It's just the two of us.
Okay. And how long have you guys been together? If you don't mind me asking.
No. I'll put me on the spot here. So we've been together.
Right, we can. If you've forgotten, we can edit it out. Don't worry.
No. So we've been together. I want to say a year and a half.
Okay.
But we dated for maybe 5-6 months before that, and she was actually probably my best friend for near on a year and a half before that. So I've known her for quite a while, but we were friends and then we started dating. Yeah.
And obviously our relationships are really important to our mental health. What I want to know is, has that excellent friendship carried on into the relationship? Like, do you still feel like amazing friends as well as partners?
Oh yeah. Like I would still class her as my best friend. And I think she'll like to hear that on the podcast as well. But no, it was good because I've been pretty bad in the past for not being able to form sort of close and meaningful relationships, and to have formed that really good friendship first to then go into an actual relationship with that person. Yeah, we just continued on as we were, but just with a romantic side to it rather than just sort of hanging out as friends.
Can I ask you a question that I think would be pertinent to a lot of adult men? You said you maybe struggled to form close and meaningful relationships. Have you at any point struggled to form close and meaningful friendships as well?
Yeah, it's actually really funny. Me and my partner were having this conversation yesterday, talking because it was a topic that I've spoken about quite a bit about with regards to my mental health. Is relationships, and one of the things that I was going to talk about later is to do with loneliness. And I was an only child growing up in a single parent household, so a single parent working household as well. Spent a lot of my time alone, so I almost had to be okay with being alone. And I think that reliance on being okay being alone made it very difficult to then form sort of meaningful relationships or friendships with people sort of further down the line as well.
So, I mean, I already find that fascinating. So you feel like in that state of being alone, you're quite comfortable in that state?
No.
And no?
I had to be okay with it growing up, and I guess I have had to be okay with it now. But I think as I've grown older and I've had friendships and relationships and they've sort of dissipated over years, I've longed for them more. So when they're not present, I think that affects me more than when it did necessarily when I was a child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I find that really interesting, and I think the not that we're on this trying to cheer people up and make everybody feel good and happy, but the slightly bad news is I don't know that gets any easier as you get older. Obviously, Brad and I are. What did you say a moment ago? 27.
Yeah.
Brad and I are older than that, and Brad, I don't know what you think about this, but I don't think that forming new friendships in adulthood actually gets any easier as you get older. If anything, it could get slightly more difficult.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I don't know if it particularly changes. I think as you get older, your sort of social circles probably shrink a little bit naturally, and therefore that could have an impact. But yeah, I guess likewise, there's opportunities. I think sort of now, like sort of friendships that I've established through Bowden's friends. Do you know what I mean? Not that I'm friends with Bowden's friends and we all go down a skate park or anything. We do that because loads of fun. But the idea that actually you go on play dates, and so you hang out with like the parents of those friends, and like football training, you see the same parents every week and stuff like that. So you kind of thrust upon their thrust upon you, I guess. But yeah, I think it's very relatable to just kind of think, yeah, it's tricky making friendships, I think.
I mean, one little thing that I heard really recently, actually, is that when you consider the way that people live today, is that we are the first generation of humans, not like right now, but maybe the last 30 years or so, that's the first generation of humans that have tried to live without a tribe, that so many of us live in. I know we're kind of coming on to loneliness and isolation later, or maybe we come onto it now, just however it naturally evolves, but as humans, we evolved because of our ability to form tribes. We weren't, when it comes to evolution, we weren't stronger, fitter, faster than the other animals, but we could cooperate and we could work together and we could communicate. But actually now, humankind is reaching that stage where so many of us live in isolation to others that it's almost against our evolution to do that. I wondered what you thought of that, Jiv.
It's really interesting. I heard sort of lectures at university when I was there in my sort of second and third year, because obviously COVID was a thing in my first year of university still, and we weren't really allowed to go out and socialise and really see people. And when I started sort of integrating into different groups when restrictions were dropped, I noticed that I was making more friends, and I think my lecturers at university saw a different side of me because I was making sort of those sort of groups of friends. And one of my lecturers, Fiona Nichols, I will reference her saying, "You found your tribe."
Oh, we love a shout out.
Yeah, but she did. She mentioned it a couple of times to me. So it's good to see that you found your tribe, you found your people. It was interesting that you used that word, because then that came to my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a really pertinent thing to just be aware of, that actually we are supposed to live in groups. And COVID, again, a massive factor in the mental health world, that we were all isolated for a little while, and then it gave us all the opportunity to reevaluate our position in tribes and the value of ourselves to tribes and the value of tribes to us. Brad, what were you thinking along that?
Yeah, just it's resonated with me, the idea of talking about tribes, because it's one of the key factors in terms of when I'm working with clients with regards to hypnotherapy. We talk about the way we rewire our brain to create a more positive mindset. There's three kind of key ingredients for that. So we need to start thinking positively. We need to start acting positively, but also we need positive interactions. And the reason why those things are so important is because when we positively interact with others, our brain releases serotonin, which is a real feel-good, powerful neurotransmitter for good mentally healthy behavior. So yeah, tribes are really important.
So Big Mac meal, what drink?
I have just started going for a Coke Zero again, because I was having
I love a Coke Zero.
I was going for the full sugar, but I need to start making healthier choices. So I guess the healthier choice is not to get fast food, but
are your healthier choices going to lead you down that deranged path where you go to a McDonald's and you say, no thanks to the fries, I'll have a bag of carrot sticks? Are you going to go that healthy? No, that's not for normal people. Grand. All right. Well, I think we'll put that order in, and then Brad will go on with some would you rathers.
Yeah, let's do it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with your choices. I'm literally quarter pounder with cheese every time I go to McDonald's. Nothing else ever gets my interest. Quarter pounder with cheese for me all the time.
I think that the last time I went, I had the double Big Mac, and I was disappointed because I thought it was going to be, instead of one piece of bread in the middle, I thought it was going to be two, and I was being really greedy. But it was literally just bread, two patties, bread, two patties, bread. Which is obviously still I know it's still a lot, but I thought I was going to get a little extra layer in there.
Well, now here's a little soundbite. Unhappiness is the gap between what you expect and your reality. So if you're expecting a double Big Mac and you just got the two patties with the standard amount of bread, that gap is called unhappiness. So I can understand your dismay.
That's called muck and happiness. Anyway, let's move along. So, Jiv, we've got you on the show because you've referenced university already, and you did something interesting in terms of kind of isolation, and we've sort of broached the subject already, and we'll dig into that. But we'd kind of just like to open up and hear a little bit about kind of your mental health journey with regards to that.
Yeah. So as I knew Brad before meeting you, Livock, but I have struggled with my mental health in the past, as I think most men have. In it, and me and Brad have discussed in person before how there is a level of embarrassment which doesn't actually need to be there to talk about it and to bring it up. I think for me, it's been a constant battle for probably the last 10 years. Before that, it probably was a thing, but being young and naive, I probably didn't actually know what it was that I was feeling. But now I think I can look back at a lot of sort of what I've gone through with regards to how I felt, and I can sort of reflect on that and look at some of the choices that I made that potentially weren't as healthy as others, with how I was looking after myself or sort of the decisions I was making. One thing I'll say is, obviously I brought it up before, is like I did spend a lot of my time as a young person alone. I struggled to make friendships. I almost would pretend to be interested in topics or interested in things that I weren't really that bothered about, to try and fit in and to try and sort of integrate social groups, when there was a level of embarrassment for me to show that I had certain interests. I think there's nothing hiding. I can sort of show in the background. Me and Brad spoke about this a little while ago, but I'm a big Star Wars fan. I love Harry Potter. I'm a massive nerd. But when I was a kid, it wasn't cool to be a nerd. I think it's a bit different.
Yeah.
So I was always part of sports teams, sports groups. Everything was sport, parties, stuff like that, just to try and fit in. When I would have probably much rather been sat at home watching the original trilogy of Star Wars. And that sort of attempt to fit in, I think, is something that I've only stopped doing since, I want to say, around about 2017. I got to, how old was I in 2017? I was 20. No, I wasn't. Yes, I was. Math. I really decided that I was going to be happy and actively sort of show my interests rather than just going with the flow and making people believe I was somebody that I wasn't.
I love all of that, Jiv. Sorry, Brad, were you trying to come in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, because it sounded like there was like a point, and was that just the point where you felt like you had matured a bit and were like, I actually no, this is who I am, or was there something that kind of created that turning point for you?
I think it was more a point of, I actually had more of an understanding that I wasn't doing okay.
Okay.
And I think it probably did come with a level of maturity, but I think it was a realization of I'm not doing great. I need to make some changes in my life to have more positive outcomes going forward.
To come in on that, one thing that I would add, so I deliver courses in adult mental health first aid and youth mental health first aid, and the age you're talking about is kind of right between the two, but in the youth one, it talks about how teenagers, because you said the word changes in there a couple of times, and teenagers, it's just all change, all of the time. Everything changes. You go from being half the height of your parents to taller than your parents. The neurotransmitters in your brain literally go way out of balance. You change often school settings, social groups. You often go from non-employed to employment. So it's all change in that time. And I wonder if, being as there's so many changes that you would have inevitably gone through as a teenager, if that in some way kind of empowered you to make your own changes, or whether, or again, whether I'm just seeing things that aren't there.
I think it was more that I wasn't looking after myself. I was making some pretty poor choices with what I was doing, which led me to say that I was fed up with the decisions I was making and wanted to make a change. And at that point as well was when I decided to take a completely different sort of direction with my career. And I also almost, so I obviously, you guys have known me as Jiv, you talked to me as Jiv, but my birth name is Jack. And at that point I was sort of, I needed a fresh start. So I'd always had the nickname Jiv from secondary school and sort of from sports teams and stuff. But I then decided to take that on and be sort of like my primary name, if you will, using my nickname more because I needed a fresh start because I didn't like who Jack had been.
That's fat. Like, what was that like for you? Tell us more about that.
Obviously, it was a big decision, but I made a lot of big changes in the space of 3 months, so it wasn't too much of a change for me because not too much of a change. It wasn't too much of a hard decision because I'd already made so much changes. It didn't really feel like it was affecting too much, and it does affect certain people still. Like there are family members who still call me my birth name because that's all they ever know me as. But in my social groups, and I don't live near any of my family anymore, so everyone I know now calls me Jed.
Can I ask, does that have an impact on you in terms of your identity now being more of a conscious construct? Like you've chosen, I'm going to be Jiv, I'm not going to be Jack, and I'm going to live in this particular way. Do you feel that puts any sort of burden of responsibility on you for that to be a success? Or not that you were rejecting your past, but just that you were saying, right, I'm not going to be that, I'm going to be this. I think if I, speaking personally, if I did that, I think because I overthink and I catastrophize all the time, and I just imagine the worst case scenario, and then imagine that it will come to be. So I think what I would do in that situation would be think, right, well if I fuck this up, it's all on me, and I'm going to look like a tit for making this big statement and then actually not being able to follow through with it. Do you bear any of that, or do you actually just feel freed of your past and able to live a more authentic and genuine life?
Yeah, I definitely think the latter.
Great.
I was at such a low point. I don't think that I don't think I ever really felt any sort of room for failure, because anything was just going upwards, and anything going forward was going to be a positive as long as I didn't sort of like drop back into those old ways. So I don't really think I felt any pressure with it. No, I've been very fortunate to be quite happy and positive with the decisions I've made in the last 7 years.
I love that.
Cool. And I'm just curious, Jiv, because we don't need to go down the road of like what, you're kind of describing what rock bottom there, because everything was up from that point, and we don't need to go down that road. But what were some of the significant changes that you consciously were like, right, this is an important change that I'm going to make?
I will mention one thing about one of the points of rock bottom, which was a realization for me.
Talk about whatever you want, Jiv.
Because I think that it's not too negative, but I think that it's something that I wanted to bring up anyway. So when I was at sort of the age of 21, 20, I was still playing football. I was massively into that, and I wasn't making very healthy decisions off the pitch, but on the pitch I was making extremely unhealthy decisions. And in reflection, and with people I've spoken to in recent years, I was essentially self-harming while playing football, which sounds like a really weird construct, but I was a defender, so I was in a position where I would be using my head a lot, and there would be a lot of tackles, and I was just doing stupid stuff. I would throw myself into things head first, literally. And it was just it was an untraditional way of self-harming because I wanted to get hurt. I didn't like myself at the time, but I think there is a certain community in that sport that revere you for being tough and brave in that scenario, and that's how you should be. But in hindsight, it's stupidity, and I was just asking for sort of pain.
I mean, I was blown away as a mental health first aid instructor. Again, on the youth course, it talks about types of self-harm. And I think if I were to write a list, previous to learning what I'd learned, it would be things like cutting, burning, flicking, pinching, those kinds of things. And then it mentioned the act of punching walls. And I was aghast. I was like, what? I punched walls when I was an angry teenager. 100% I punched walls. Sometimes I punched walls till my knuckles bled. And I didn't realise, wait, that's self-harm. And it really helped, maybe mentioning it on the podcast will help other people realise that actually that is, to lots of people, what self-harm is. Like, there's this feeling inside of you. I don't know if you felt the same in your role as a defender. But for me, it was that case of, well, there's this rage inside of me, and it feels like doing this gets rid of it. It feels like doing this makes it feel better, which, as soon as I realised that, allowed me to empathise with people that would cut or burn or flick or pinch or whatever they might do. I suddenly understood, it feels like a release, because 100% as an angry teenage boy, and I wasn't angry all the time, of course, but when I was angry, hitting walls helped me feel better. Can you relate to that? Does that work for you?
Yeah, no, I think it was, I don't think it was so much being angry, as it was, sort of self-esteem issue, and not liking myself very much, where I just wanted to get hurt. And I would put myself, like I said before, I would put myself into difficult positions and situations where I was putting myself in harm's way, both on and off the pitch. But the football one was a really sort of like sticking point with me, that it's massively seen as, oh, you're being brave, you're being tough, but it definitely wasn't.
Did it make it harder for you that it was revered and approved of when you knew it was not necessarily coming from a positive place? But I imagine when you're being tough as a defender and you're getting praised for it, did it make it harder for you to realise what was going on and then to hopefully stop that behaviour?
I think only in hindsight. I think when it was happening, it sort of added to the endorphins, it added to the adrenaline of what I was feeling like in the moment. But when I look back at it now, and over the last sort of 5 or 6 years, I've thought, wow, that was stupid.
And it kind of lends itself, doesn't it, but it's back to that idea of the tribe and fitting in. Because actually there's that element of it when you start to recognise this isn't a very healthy thing, but if I stop doing this, it's going to take me away from that tribe who are, that's a big part of the reason why I'm in, because it's like, oh yeah, Jiv, Manley's, he's the Vinnie Jones at the back sort of thing. So yeah, it's a conflict, isn't it? We've talked about the idea of tribes, we've talked about isolation. Tell us a little bit about your dissertation and what you did and what sort of impact you found that had.
Yeah, so I can give you the title of my dissertation, but I can sort of make it a little bit thing. So it was called Alone on the Moors, and it was an autoethnographic exploration of the effects of isolation and solitude on mental health and well-being, which is quite a big mouthful. Essentially, what it was me going on to Dartmoor National Park for 3 days with no contact from the outside world or other people at all, and basically putting myself through the ringer to have a focus on what I was perceiving as my mental health in those moments, like through video entries and diary entries and stuff like that. So as I was going, and I took photos as well as I was sort of doing my journey.
What were your findings?
Isolation and solitude is hard. I think the biggest takeaway, well, there was a few massive takeaways that I had from it. One of which was when I was busy and I was in sort of a flow state, I was okay. There wasn't really much an issue. I was engaging with my surroundings, and I did quite a lot of hiking. I think I did about 20 kilometers each day, apart from the last day. I had quite a short day. And it was when I was busy, I was okay. And like I said, reading the map and just sort of keeping my brain focused and taking in my surroundings, talking to sheep and horses on my way past them because I hadn't seen a person in 24 hours, was sort of my way of sort of coping with it. As soon as I stopped and I had set up camp for the night and I had done dinner and got in my sleeping bag and sort of got ready for the downtime before I went to sleep, that was when it got tough, because the realization of I haven't spoken to a person in however long, I haven't even seen a person in however long. What are the people I care about doing right now? All of those things sort of started creeping in, and I went to some pretty dark places in the time that I was out there. But there was some massive highs in that experience as well. Of on the final day, I got quite emotional. I was walking towards sort of my end point, and I was going to be meeting up with my partner and one of our closest friends. And we were going to have a swim together, and sort of they were going to meet me on sort of a pickup point. I was really, really excited to see them, and it goes back to what we said before about sort of like relationships and meaningful relationships. I had so much more of a appreciation and understanding for how much the people in my life mean to me. And I think that was possibly my largest takeaway from the entire thing.
I find that fascinating.
Cool. Yeah, really interesting. I just thought it's really interesting because, Jiv, obviously we're having these discussions a lot, and kind of what we're uncovering, whatever the scenario, is that it seems to be the male response is to keep busy and almost kind of do the two things you talked about there. Firstly, to try and keep busy, to keep some element of control and sanity. And just that whole, like, almost isolating. I think when people's stress levels get elevated and we're struggling, we're anxious, we're depressed, some of those things, we do the things that you deliberately put yourself into there. Like the isolation and the quietness is the thing that we found men saying they struggle with. And that's why they're kind of making choices to keep busy. It's why often people aren't taking time off work. It's just that ingrained, like, let's just keep busy so I don't allow my mind to get into those things, and often men isolate themselves as well and kind of put their heads down and stop seeing friends. So it's really interesting to hear you talk about having made the deliberate decision to do that and how hard that was.
Yeah, I think over the first sort of day it wasn't so bad, but I think once I got into the second day and that realization hit that I still wasn't going to see anybody for close to 48 hours, I think that was when I started to sort of struggle with it. I think I don't know if there is sort of a time limit and a time sort of like frame of when isolating yourself still feels okay. I think that there was still some sort of questions about sort of what I was going to be doing over the 3 days, because I do enjoy being in the outdoors, and it's something that it's a pastime of mine that I've really enjoyed. I studied outdoor education at university, which is why I did that as part of my dissertation. So that sort of goes hand in hand with the fact that I do enjoy being in the outdoors. And after the first day, I was like, I've still enjoyed it because I feel like I'm on expedition. Like, I've done expeditions through my time at university, but it was then sort of there was a moment on the second day when I think I probably first realized, wow, I am alone, was when I was walking down a path on Dartmoor National Park, and there was two sort of like quite large grass banks on either side, and I stopped. It was really hot. It was April last year. I don't know if you remember, but it was quite warm, and I was expecting it to be cold. And I sat down sort of below where the bank level was, and all of the wind noise stopped because I was sort of sheltered from it. Obviously, there was no road noise because there weren't any roads anywhere near where I was. I hadn't seen a person all day at that point, not even a mile in the distance. I hadn't seen a person. And that was the first point of feeling like there was nothing. Because there was no sound anywhere apart from the ruffling of my trousers or anything. And that was, I think, that point in that second day really did hit me of like, wow, I'm alone.
Can I ask you two things about that, Jiv? Thing number one, how did that aloneness make you feel? In fact, I'll ask you both, and then you can answer them whichever order you want. One, how did being that alone make you feel? And two, have you felt similarly alone since, not out on the moors, but just in day-to-day life? I certainly, not to such a great an extent, I don't think, but I think in my own personal experience, there are definitely times where I feel alone in what I'm doing, but I might be seeing people and I might be engaged in social life, but not necessarily feeling connected to people. And I wondered if you'd felt that since, and if having felt alone on the moors, how that's changed how you approach feeling alone in other areas of your life.
I definitely haven't felt that of solitude and loneliness, that experiment. Because it was scary how sort of quiet it got at that moment in time. Because I think we're also used to the hustle and bustle of modern day life, and being in a city now. I grew up in the countryside, but being in a city now, it's noise everywhere. And to not hear anything was quite soft. But I completely sort of understand what you mean by feeling alone, even if you're in a social setting. Because you don't have to be alone to feel lonely.
100%.
Yeah.
Another question that I want to ask about this, and I'm not trying to silver line your experience because that sort of takes away from the validity of the experience, but I wonder, we're talking about aloneness a lot, but if we think about the connections that you had the opportunity to make on that on your dissertation, I wonder, because part of the philosophy that I subscribe to talks about how connections are vital for our positive mental health, and they can be connections to other people, of course, but there's other types of connections, including connections to ourself, connections to our own past trauma, and connections to nature. And I wondered if you identified, like, whilst it would have been taxing on your mental health, the isolation aspect, was there anything that was like a positive? Were there any things where you felt more connected to yourself or to nature or anything like that?
I think that connection to nature is something that the theory of like sense of place is massive in the outdoor education sort of like circle. I remember there was an article in a journal by Dr. Mark Leather, shout out, he was one of my lecturers at Marjan, and he did a piece of work with I think the gentleman's name was Jakob Thorsteinsson, something like that. He was
Jakob Thorsteinsson.
I don't want to insult the Icelandic, but it was a journal in the outdoor environmental education for higher education journal. That was a mouthful.
Easy for you to say.
I know. And sort of the whole thing of sense of place is our relationship with where we are and the environment that we find ourselves in. And sort of like they spoke massively about sort of focusing on relations between ourselves, others, and nature, and showing and sort of slowing down from more adrenaline fueled experiences, and giving space for more mindful embodied experiences, which was definitely what I experienced that expedition. I would say that yes, there were some adrenaline sort of fueled bits because being on your own in a sort of hostile environment is quite scary. but there was peaceful moments. And they refer to sort of places where humans create genuine attachment and belonging in space as being sort of areas where you can sort of create a sense of place. And I think that's sort of what you were saying about sort of that relationship with the environment is sort of massive.
Yeah.
Has that impacted? Do you feel a deeper connection with Dartmoor now? Would you do something like that again, or is it just a place you enjoy going with, with your partner? Or
100%. I enjoyed being up there on Dartmoor anyway, but I think I will never forget that expedition because of how impactful it was to me. So that route I took, I probably couldn't remember the exact route, but I could tell you sort of roughly where I went and sort of where I camped. And I can remember the settings of where I camped every night as well. So they are meaningful experiences.
I have a theory, and I think part of mankind's happiness is the ability to feel mastery over his environment. But I've only dreamt this theory up myself from my own stupid experiences. And if you're talking about what you studied on your degree program, then you might be able to add a theoretical element to it. So I don't think it needs to be the natural environment. Like, I know people who can navigate the London Underground like the back of their hand. It's no big deal. You go from here, you get off there, you go from here, you get off there, you move to this platform. And they've got that mastery over their environment, so London isn't intimidating to them. They feel comfortable with it. The first time I really experienced a shift with it and a change with it was the first time I went to the Lake District. And I used to go to the lakes every Easter on a walking holiday, and I used to enjoy walking before I'd done that. But the very first time we drove into our accommodation, big group of us, the rest of them were all walkers as well. And I looked at the hills and the fells. Where were we? We were in Patterdale, and the hills, the mountains and the fells all around us. At that time, I remember feeling really hemmed in by it because I didn't know that I had the ability to master that environment. And I don't mean boss it, but I just felt like that's a mountain. It's nice-ish to look at because it's a big geographical feature, but I feel hemmed in by that on this side, on that side, and behind us as well. But after the first day, when we're like, right, we're up that trail, and it's hours of walking, and it's long, long days. When we got back to the accommodation, and I could feel like, wow, I can look out at this vista and think, I've mastered that. I was so much happier. I felt so much less hemmed in and constrained by it, and way more liberated by it. And I wonder if you had similar experiences,
I think,
or if you knew the theoretical side of that.
So that I don't sort of claim to be a master of sort of the theoretics when it comes to outdoor education.
You're on here as an expert, Jiv.
Or the conversation I had with Brad before is that I'm the master of my experiences. But I see what you're saying with regards to mastering. I don't know if it is necessarily mastering. I think that there's, when you're talking about sort of relationships with our environment, having especially the outdoors, because that's sort of what I studied, having a respect for that environment is massive. I think that they probably can come in tandem where you feel like you've got a mastery and a respect for it. It actually makes me think of a book called Alone on the Moors. I don't know if either of you have read Alone on the Moors. That was my dissertation. Mountains of the Mind is the name of the book. And it's sort of an exploration of human history and the interactions with the mountains. And it looks at spiritual and cultural significance of mountains in different cultures around the world. And sort of those deep connections between humans and nature. And it's a really interesting read. It's a tough read, but it's a really interesting read if you ever get the time to look at it. But there's a quote from that book. I think it'll come to me. Something like the best view comes after the hardest climb. And I think when you talk about that mastery of your environment, I think that is quite a nice quote that would summarize potentially sort of that feeling of mastery of your environment.
Yeah, I really get that. As soon as you started talking about that, Nibbo, You wise old soul. I obviously went straight to surfing with that in my mind, and that connection I have when I'm in the water, and I really feel like that is my place. And the same that you touched on, Jiv. Like, I have massive respect for the ocean. And I've spent many a year sat in it, trying to catch waves. And there's lots of bits that frighten me about the ocean. None of it on the shore. I'm absolutely in my element when I'm sat out in the sea and I'm surfing and I've got cliffs all around me. Like, I love that. It's where I just feel at home. Or if I'm paddleboarding and going into caves and stuff like that, that is where I really feel at peace in that environment. And I just love that connection that I have. And it wouldn't matter what was going on for me. If I could take myself there, that's just where I would be comfortable and calm and at peace. So yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Well, can we all agree that not that we're on the takeaways yet, we still haven't even got to the would you rathers, but a takeaway that I think I'm going to try to bagsy is that connection to your environment, whether it's natural or unnatural, but connection to your environment is hugely important for your mental health. Would we agree with that?
Yeah.
Good. Right. Don't say it when it comes to the takeaways then.
Never before, Jiv, have we had anyone bagsy a takeaway, but there we are, exclusive. So my questions, and I'll just keep this quick because I think it is good time for us to move on to the would you rathers. Just two really quick ones. Biggest thing you learned while you're out there?
I would say the importance of meaningful relationships.
Yeah, cool.
Relationships that are meaningful to me.
Yeah, cool. And you mentioned even talking to the sheep, which just gave me vibes of what was the film with Tom Hanks where he talked to Wilson, the Castaway. Gave me those sorts of vibes. But yeah,
no, Brad, sorry, no, Castaway. Not castaway.
There's no R between the A and the S. All right, so it's not cast away. Anyway, moving on from your racial slur. My other comment, to take this back to a serious level, was talking to the sheep. Did you ever get a response, or were they always just a bit woolly?
Very good. Dear. Very good.
I've been sat on that for about 20 minutes.
That's. I would be switching off now if I was listening to this podcast.
As you can imagine, being in a classroom with Brad for half of this previous school year, I got so many jokes like that.
Anyway, let's move on from that. So, Jiv, we kind of come to our would you rather section. And I think I'm gonna jump in. We've got a would you rather about negative emotions. We've got a would you rather about positive emotions, and we've got a silly would you rather. And I think I'm going to go straight with the negative one because it just leads nicely on from what we've been talking about. So that first would you rather that I'd love to know your thoughts on is: would you rather feel isolation or alienation?
Yeah.
I know what you're thinking, guys. That can't be the end of part one already. Well, I'm afraid it is. So you're going to have to tune in next week to find out what Jiv chooses in that would you rather. Does he go for isolation or does he go for alienation? And the rest of this really great episode. So we hope you enjoyed part one. Check us out next Sunday and you'll get to listen to part two of Jiv's episode.